Welcome, everybody. I'm joined by Eric, and we are here to talk about Lord of the Rings TCG and the market. So there's recently a big collection that sold, which gave a lot of information about what the sales price of cards are. We want to do this because there's not a lot of transparency in sort of the Lord of the Rings TCG market. What are people paying? I see the same posts like every week where it's like, I found this card. What's it worth? What's it worth? And we just thought we'd do a little transparency update. And Eric was kind enough to put together a really handy spreadsheet. But Eric, what thoughts do you kind of have at the top here?
Yeah, so just thoughts on the spreadsheet overall. Yeah, like you said, there was a major collector that sold his entire collection. So this was able to give us market data on every individual set. And when I say individual set, this included all foil sets. So like movie block foils are very popular. This collection included a separate listing for every complete set in the movie block. 1 through 8 and 10. So some very key values there. And then also there's some extremely very limited rare Masterworks cards from the later sets like 17 and 18, like we talked about in our 11 rarest cards video. Those were all present here too as complete sets. So definitely gave us some very good data points that were just, lacking because of scarcity of a lot of the cards that are part of this collection. And then, yeah, there were certain data points where we saw that certain things just aren't of high value, meaning regular non-foil cards from the first 12 sets are pretty low demand, but great for anyone who wants to get into the game to actually play it, to be able to pick up sets of those really good first chunk of the game for very inexpensive.
Yeah,
So
really fun part of the game as well. Like I think that those are the sort of core playing sets. So I'll just note this does not track set prices from 1 to 12 because frankly, like the values of those, like most of the sets are under $100, like your 150. Return of the King's a little bit more, maybe 250, 300. And we were kind of discussing before the show why that is. And there's some good cards there, but this is only foil sets here. We didn't do 1 through 12, but kind of going through the foil sets, starting off there. So we have a bunch of other tabs we'll share in a second, but the biggest, actually most expensive foil set's the Return of the King one, which is a little surprising to me, but I think Fellowship at $37.50. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but it's 365 foils, and I would say at least 50 of them are worth like over $50. There's just some really, really big ones that people want to chase, like the One Ring, Isildur's Bane is probably $300, $400 card just because it's highly collectible, but there's also really good cards to play and some main characters like Aragorn and Gimli and Elrond, etc. So I was a little surprised Fellowship wasn't more, but these are the numbers. I think one of the things that jumps out to me is why is Mines of Moria so low? You'd think with a Balrog, but Mines of Moria was, I think, printed. So, they didn't have enough Fellowship from my understanding. So they course corrected with Mines of Moria and printed too much. So I think of all the sets, there's a lot of Mines of Moria sort of floating around, more so than Fellowship.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. And, aside from the Balrog, that's a key card, but there's a huge significant dip in quality when you look at Fellowship of the Ring compared to Mines of Moria, just in terms of the card quality in there, that Fellowship really carries all the staple cards from the original game because that's the original base set. So I think that it is incredibly heavily populated with good cards. But yeah, if I were to do evaluation, I would probably put a Fellowship set slightly higher than a Tower set or a King set. But I think all of those sets are reasonably in that $4,000 to $5,000 range, and that's good information for people to have too. Because for someone who's collected this game a long time ago and not following with the current market, they're going to be shocked, just out of their chair that the prices on this are that high because, back in the day you were picking up these foil sets for $100 or whatever. So it just, no one cared and they were just readily available. And to see that, okay, now, 20 years later, these sets are an asset that are $4,000 or $5,000. That's important information for people to know, and know that, hey, I've got this cool One Ring card that I saved that I got for $10 or that I got as a prize for whatever. Yeah, that's worth $400 or $500 now, and I think that's the climate we're in, is that One Rings from these sets are $400 to $500, and complete sets are $4,000 to $5,000. And that's just adjusting yourself to those numbers and orienting can be very surprising for people that aren't following this market. So, and that's pretty consistent with sales we've seen. It's just nice to see them all at once, to say, hey, these all sold at once, and these are the prices that, this was a very organized, or maybe not organized, but very involved process where lots of top buyers were aware that these were happening, and there was solicitations going on to make sure that everyone who was interested in these sets was involved in the bidding process, even though it was a private auction, not through eBay. It was incredibly thorough to make sure that the interested people were involved. So I feel like these are pretty good values to use as a baseline market price as of current.
The other ones that jump out at me as low is Ensa Fangorn at 500. That's a little surprising because I don't have that set complete, and I would actually think about buying it at that price just to did not deal with the tedium of collecting the missing 60.
That's low for sure. Mount Doom, I will say, for whatever reason, Mount Doom foil sets were readily available. I know this myself because, back in the day from wholesale gaming, I bought some sets for $60, and those were just easy to get, and when I say $60, literally a complete full foil set, you can tell, that's more in the $500-$600 range now. But I would say Ensa Fangorn is low because that hasn't been my experience. That sets of that have been readily available. So yeah, I think that is a little bit low, but the rest of the prices to me seem to check out pretty well. That I would say, Realms, Helm's Deep, Ents of Fangorn, Siege of Gondor, I'd say those are all on that same tier, that are in that 1,500-ish range.
Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind, I know these are huge numbers, but these are also kind of big. Like the base sets in Return of the King, Two Towers, and Fellowship, it's 365 cards, 121 rares. You had one rare per booster box. So this is an insane collecting journey to get there. I say this as someone who's close to completing that first 3 sets. And it's been 2 years of slowly collecting 4 or 5 foils here, 4 or 5 foils there. It's just in total, you're looking at 1,500 foils here. So it's a lot of cards. And I understand that the total number there is 1,800, but this is or 18,000. It's a lot of physical things to find.
I would say, again, it's hard to say, but for people that have actually put together a collection like this, where you have a complete foil set, again, to orient everyone to this conversation, we're talking about all foil cards in this. To complete all 9 base sets in all foil, there's under 100 of that in the world, in terms of people who put that together. So,
I agree. And one other thing on Mount Doom, I've actually heard a little bit of background on this. So Mount Doom Reflections came out before Mount Doom, and then I think Shadows was announced, and so everybody just skipped buying Mount Doom because they're like, oh, they're doing a reset with set 11. Why even bother with Mount Doom? So a lot of people just skipped it, which is why you also see the starters everywhere, the booster boxes. It's just people didn't buy it because they're like, why would I buy a set when they're going to reset the game in 3 months?
And there was kind of, I think at that time there was speculation of is this second edition where literally our first edition cards won't be good anymore, because that's what they were kicking around. And then they kind of took that weird middle ground of it's second edition, but not really second edition.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next thing here. So that was foil sets. This is the sets sort of 15, 17, 18, and then the rare foils, Masterworks. Set 13 is represented in a different tab, which possibly could have been integrated here, but this is when things get kind of expensive because of print run. So I think we've talked about this before, but at this point that the game was kind of on its last legs. The movies had already come out, so Lord of the Rings hype was dying down by 2005. It just wasn't the same cultural cachet it had in 2003, where it's everything was oh my god, Viggo Mortensen's the hottest star in the world. And so this just has a shorter print run. So we have Hunter set 15 for 1,400, Rise of Sauron. So these are complete sets, as a reminder. So there are cards in here that are 200-300 each. And then Rise of Sauron, this is not surprising actually that set is higher than the other two, because I think a lot of times the middle sets get forgotten. It's like middle children, where people think of things in blocks of 3, and they're like, oh, it's the youngest and the oldest. And then, so I think with Rise of Sauron, I have had a harder time collecting that over the last couple of years than I have Treachery and Deceit, because everyone, it's oh, it's the last set. I mean, there was technically one after it that was fixed cards, but I think a lot more people bought Treachery and Deceit than Rise of Sauron.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that the ratios here of, again, just looking at the base sets, regular sets 15, 17, 18, I'd say the pricing ratios there are exactly correct from historically what I've seen in terms of Rise being the most, then Treachery, then Hunters. I would say these are probably my personal opinion, and the market on this has maybe fallen a little bit, but I'd say peak pandemic pricing, you could probably add $500 to each of these in terms of what they were selling for. So it looks to me like they're a little lower than the peak. Also could be due to the fact that people who are the same people who be interested in buying these sets were also just shelling out high dollars for Masterworks cards. And so they focus more on those than on the base sets. That's kind of, there's some of that factor in play too, potentially, but the ratios are very good. And it's within, I'd say, lower end, but within the right range.
I think one thing to note about Rise of Sauron is it had way more interesting masterworks, in my opinion, right? That like Treachery and Deceit Masterwork.
Compared to Treachery and Deceit, the Masterworks are immensely better in Rise of Saruman.
They're just more interesting cards. They're more collectible. Like Treachery and Deceit, all the Masterworks are like artifacts. It's like, oh, Denethor's sword. That's exactly what I wanted a Masterwork of, because I needed this like hated character's sword. You know, that's what I just picked up myself. So there's no real big surprises here. I think the biggest surprise actually for me is the value of the Masterworks from Rise of Saruman. I had them priced at like mentally like 400 to 500 each, and to see them go for the average of 750 each of 9, like you're just getting into, that's a serious cost there for some cards.
Yeah, that's 750 for one card, and this is a set of 9. So yeah, the set of 9 went for 6750, and I would agree with you, Matt, that of the prices here, I'd say that in terms of market price, I'd say the Rise of Saruman is definitely on the higher end. And so I think that there were, again, all it takes is two higher end bidders that both really want the particular set. And in the context of a Rise of Saruman Masterwork set, that is, as a set, the most limited item in the game. There's single cards like OD 13 and 14 that has a single card, maybe more limited. But when you talk about 9 cards that are all of that similar limited nature bundled as a set, you're just very extremely rarely ever going to see that. So I think that just the immense scarcity of that pushed the price up. And I will say the same comment as you. It does seem like there are more Treachery and Deceit Masterworks available on the market than Rise of Saruman. That for whatever reason, again, all the information I hear is that those print runs were relatively similar. But from my personal observation, it's much harder to get Masterworks or RFs of Rise of Saruman. Much harder to find.
Yep, I agree. So total price there for all set 15 to 18 is around 20,000. But once again, Masterworks for 1 per booster box. And so it is quite hard to just collect this all. Even back in the day, if you were buying a lot of it, you might not have been able to find 9 boxes of this stuff. So actually one thing I also know is I'm surprised the Hunter's Masterworks are, 925. I would have guessed like maybe closer to 1,200, but that's interesting to see here. So we're going to move on to the promos here. The promos are one thing that I just refuse to collect because it's so damn confusing. There's like so many of them. Some are foil, some are not foiled. And so I think there's around 130 promos. Is it a little bit more?
Yeah, 129 in the OP set and then 14 in the OD set. So yeah.
And within that, like I think there are ones that there's a foil version and non-foil version,
there's 3 cards like that are not high value cards. They're more of the junk promos, but yeah, they're a Smeagol, Arwen, and Eowyn, Smeagol, Eowyn, and Faramir. There's a foil and non-foil version, which is incredibly confusing to and they're numbered the same. There's not a different number. And then, when they first started making the promos, they primarily did non-foil, and then halfway through, they decided they'd make them all foil. So it's very confusing. But the point on this one, I think, just to focus on, in the OPs, the primarily rare cards in that are the chase cards, if you will, again, kind of referring back to our 11 rarest cards video, is those online promo series where it had the in particular, the Eomer, that is a always touted as a $500 card. I don't know that it's quite that high, but that Aomer and then the other mains, the Gandalf, the Frodo, the Arwen from that same series, those are where you're getting, a good bulk of the value for the OP set. And then as it pertains to the OD set, the huge chase cards there is the OD 13 and the OD 14. That's where you're getting the vast value of from that as well. And so that's where I kind of made the note in the spreadsheet here to say, hey, even if you consider zero value for the rest of the ODs, you're looking at a $1,900-ish value for Falls of Rouse or Imladris. That's OD 13 and OD 14. So if anyone's telling you, these are $5,000 cards a piece, that's high, obviously, because you say no, the whole set, including both of those cards, is $3,850. So you can tell me they're $2,000 cards, I'll believe it, but more than that, you're pulling the wool over my eyes a little.
You're just starting to hit a threshold with the you're getting to like this is a mortgage payment for some folks, and it's you just start to lose a lot of collectors. I think.
Yeah, when you say this is a $2,000 card for a dead CCG, and it's a site card that was it's just rare because it was unprinted. Or undistributed. So that's weird. Even like you said, the Masterworks, that's something cool. And even if you're paying $750, it's like, you can compare it to like, hey, I got a foil Jedi Luke or a foil Darth Vader. It's like, yeah, I got this really cool foil card of a really cool character. You don't have that cachet here with with OD 13 and OD 14 for sure. And then their prices individually, I'd say, are probably double any other card in the game, even if you compare them to those, say, a good Rise of Saruman masterwork like Aragorn, $1,000 for that Aragorn masterwork, still 2,000 probably for OD 13 or OD 14. And most people would probably rather have that $1,000 Aragorn than a $2,000 site, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's way more iconic and easier to explain to like your significant other why you spent $1,000 on Viggo Mortensen versus like this site that I swear, bro, is a lot. All right, let's close out. Or we got a couple more left here. So this is sort of a miscellaneous / other. So we have Reflections at 300, which I guess didn't sell. I think Reflections sells for around 300 complete. One of the surprising things to me has actually been the precipitous drop in Reflections. When I first got into the game back in like 2020, Reflections sets were like $500, right? I don't know if it was just like new collectors coming in, but I've just seen Reflections go down and down and down.
Yeah, that's interesting you observe that. My personal opinion on that is the word is out that foils are valuable, so everyone scours through their collections for foils, and then everyone is pulling out their Reflections foils, and suddenly it's like, oh, actually Reflections was pretty heavily printed, and the foils from Reflections aren't valuable. What's valuable is 1 through 8 and 10, but not 9, and that, to explain that to someone who's just going through their collection and pulling out foils, they're not going to know the difference. And so I think that's what's happening is a lot of foils are getting recovered, and that's resulting in a glut of Reflections. Because I agree with you that they're highly playable cards. Very good stuff in there, like Gil Galad and some very
Burin's very good, right? Yeah,
Burin, Freka. There's some essential absolutely essential cards in there. But I think that, there was a lot of that product printed and opened. Again, that's one that's, pretty hard to find sealed, but I think opened, there's a pretty vast supply of open Reflection sets.
The rule of Reflections for all the Cypher games is it's whenever Reflections comes out, they need money because Reflections from a printing standpoint, it's great because you have a little small fixed set, right? Whether it's foils or premium cards, and then you toss in all the garbage you had left from other print runs.
Yeah, you clear out the warehouse and
Reflections for Lord of the Rings. It's like sometimes there's a foreign language card in there. It's like set so it's really just like random junk which you can get good stuff, but it's also like a lot of times.
Yeah, and any Reflections I've opened, I've found a lot of like non-foil Polish cards and stuff like that. It's like just
some funny stuff in there. Okay, moving along, we have our Black Riders Masterwork. I think this is overvalued at 360. Black Riders booster boxes are like $150 or something. So it feels a little bit much to have this at 360, but I guess that's what it's sold at. Then you have sort of the Bloodlines, which I think is going to continue to creep up. So the regular set was $475, the rare foils at $430, and then Masterworks only at $775. I'm a little surprised it wasn't a little bit more, but I think there's also just like people hit their collecting capacity with like I already have the Masterworks. I don't need another set because that's the thing with the rare foils and Masterworks. You don't really need another set unless you're totally insane and putting them into decks. But it's generally you need one of.
Yeah.
And then the last two items there is the expanded Middle Earth, which were those little boxes for 200. That's sort of what I expected, maybe a little bit less.
Those again, that sealed is just like incredibly scarce, but those are very plentiful opened. I'm not surprised that's that.
Yeah, and the other thing is 2 of each came in each box, so you got basically 2 sets if you had all 3 boxes. And then the Wraith collection at 200. This also seems a little low, to be honest. I've seen them sell for like 250, 275, but looks like 200. I think this is another one. The Wraith cards are terrible. So I don't think anyone's really looking to have a play set. They're just like, they want to have one set for a binder. So the total here is 2,700 for, sort of the miscellaneous.
Yeah. And if you look at it, like where the value is at, like on the whole collection, I thought that's interesting to see. And, just breaking it down in large, even numbers, it's basically like your movie block foil sets, let's just say 20K, your 15 through 18, including Masterworks and RF, that's another 20K. So those are your 2 huge value points is those 2 items. And then all of this random stuff together is only a couple $1,000. And then anything else beyond that is not even worth mentioning. But, you add everything together, if you're paying full market price for all the separate components of a complete Lord of the Rings collection, it's probably, 45 to 50K. Is the range that you're looking at,
I just note that like to get this sort of collection though is going to take so much time if you're doing it organically. Like obviously you can buy this all like, this was just for sale, but I've been collecting this stuff for like 2.5 years and I would say I'm probably halfway here and it has been a lot of blood, sweat and tears. Like
if you don't buy complete sets and you're just trying to piece together things from individual cards, especially those set 1 through 10 foil sets, trying to pick up all the rares, it's a long grind. Yeah. And then some of the stuff like Rise of Saruman Masterworks, if I reached out today to like the most active Facebook group on Lord of the Rings that you and I are both in and said, hey, I want to buy Rise of Saruman Masterworks, I would bet I could put together maybe 3 or 4 cards. I wouldn't even be able to put together. I wouldn't even be able to put together that set if I wanted to. And I just said, I want these cards, name your price. It just wouldn't even be existing for me to buy.
Yeah, no, that's right. So and I think that level of scarce is not actually good long-term for like the health of the value there, because you want something to be so scarce that it's available that at least people are like whispering about it. It's like, oh, like, but there's some stuff here where I don't know, like at whatever it was, 750 per set 17 Masterwork. It just seems like it might be hard to replicate that sale. But of course, I mean, because they're so scarce, people forget they exist.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
It's like people use the foils and decks. People, do all sorts of stuff because they're kind of around. But set 17 just is nowhere to be found. So looking at close to 50K for all this stuff, and it's a large number. So I want to add on a more optimistic note. If you guys want listening, you got this like, holy shit, this game's, or excuse my like, holy crap, this game is insanely expensive. Fear not. You can get a ton of cards for probably 25 cents a rare, right? There are so many ways of getting this game cheaply and playing it. You don't need all this expensive stuff. This is just really the high end, like the highest.
Yeah. And I would say if you wanted to put together a play set of the movie, let's not even say play set, let's just say a complete set of the movie block, which is the most popular sets 1 through 10, put together that full non-foil. And again, foils, they're exactly the same card. It's not like, oh, this special version is only in foil. You want to put together sets 1 through 10, you do that for under $1,000 easy, So if you wanted to play the game, it's tremendously accessible. And that's what I hope to see more people, less on the collecting foil chase aspect and more on the playing aspect, because this is quite honestly, it's a fantastic game. And the basic non-foil cards are just, there is plentiful supply of those for that sets 1 through 10. 11, 12 too, but do that with what you will, because that's kind of a whole different reset of the game. And then you get chopped off and can't go any further than that unless you want to start putting some big bucks into it. But, the 1 through 10, for anyone collecting, again, we didn't cover the pricing on that in this video specifically, just because we're wanting to focus on the higher tier. But the 1 through 10 is so accessible. I can't recommend it enough for people to buy non-foil cards from sets 1 through 10.
Like a Two Towers set, 365 cards you can go have fun with. It's like $100, $90 or something. Like,
yeah. It's kind of a no, and even just to get one copy of the cards for a collection, great. Or, get yourself a playset. You could probably get a playset of complete movie block playset. I'd say you find that $2,500, it's not, and again, you'd build that over time, but it's not insurmountable. Like to say, hey, what really would be a full complete player's collection is a $2,500 investment. It's not a, $50,000 investment like we're talking. That's just for all the weird high-end niche stuff.
Yeah. And stay away from sets 15 on, or really 13 on. Like, you just don't need to like, it's actually not very balanced. It's kind of clunky gameplay. Like, it's not even the best playing experience. So this game can be accessible. It's a lot of fun. I've devoted a lot of time to it. Eric has as well. You guys should check out his channel, Library of Orthonk. I'll leave a link in the video description here. But there's lots of resources to get out there and play the game. But we're heading to the holidays, so I hope everyone gets some Lord of the Rings for Christmas, I guess, myself included. So that's all for today. Any final thoughts, Eric?
No, just was very excited to have access to all this information. I think kind of the next step of this from a market transparency standpoint is, focusing on some of the very high dollar foil singles, just so that the market's aware of that. But sometimes it's easier to get pricing on those just from eBay sold listings or from two of the popular stores. There's Category 1 Games in the United States and Card Game Geek in Europe. Those are great resources for anyone who says, hey, I don't know what is the value of this one particular card. Look at those three resources. And again, you and I know this common sense. Always look at eBay sold listings, not just what it's listed for actively, but eBay sold is your best bet. But then also just for competitive market pricing to see if something is available on the market, look to Category 1 and Card Game Geek. Those guys are good resources too.
I think I want to close by saying, remember that everything is worth what someone else is willing to pay, right? Mm-hmm. And, you could list a card for $300 on eBay, but that does not mean that's worth $300. It's all about the sold or the transaction.
Correct. And I would say the Lord of the Rings market of any dead CCG falls into that worse than any other game I've seen, as far as extremely high asking prices that should be disregarded. So keep that in mind if you're browsing active eBay listings.
Absolutely. Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And maybe we'll do one of these in like a year or 6 months, but this has been a lot of fun. So thanks so much, Eric, and we'll see you next time.